problem with that unit is that they have so much power that they need to be watched, and I told you that they would get to that down the line, and they're going to get down to it here very shortly. They say, on the other hand, this unit could be bought by the rich, and they could be crooked, perverted, power-hungry. What's to keep them from abuse if they choose that path? First, their task is to settle the problem to the acceptance of all parties. All parties. If the records show a constant unhappiness by one or both parties, they have failed and they are removed. The second safeguard is a concept that again will flow through the entire contents of Book 4. It is also the second concept needed to make a bureaucracy more efficient and less costly. That second safeguard is public trust laws. Now, this is a pretty critical part of the whole concept. Trust, like faith, is a term we must redefine. Trust is given just after there have been in place those safeguards which will ensure the trust well-founded. In other words, I trust you when I know you will suffer greater consequence by breaking that trust than fulfilling it. In this discussion on how to change our society, trust will be used for many bureaucratic units. It will be called, or we will call it, public trust, and it will be enforced by public trust laws. Now, these are special laws, not for Joe Average, but only for people in bureaucracy, only for people basically that have the ability to affect the public negatively if they were crooked. And the concept are, the people that we're talking about are like judges, the 5% unit that we just talked about, the police, obviously, government officials that affect like building permits or, could be anything, but government officials that hold your welfare in their hands, and a myriad of other people who are in a position to abuse the power. These need controls placed on their lives. As it stands now, we just trust them and hope we can catch them in the act if they let us down. Catch them in the act? We catch them in the act all the time and then allow them to retire with a pension well beyond anything most normal people could hope to earn when they're working. They retire on more than our workers get by far. Boy, I bet that hurts. Now they're being sarcastic. I'll bet they won't do that again. I'll bet all those other people in the position of power will take note and give a second thought to any abuse they were planning. Right. Okay, we made the point. Because we have lost control, the bureaucracies are throwing the little atrocities right in our face. The beast of burden is traveling its own path with its own load. In all areas of our life, bureaucracies have trampled on us, and it seems that there's nothing we can do. And boy, let me tell you, that's number one. There's nothing we can do. Although you can start to see now that there are things that we could do. The knowledge of what a bureaucracy is and how to cut off its head will help, but the pivot point here is the control of those who have public trust. They aren't necessarily at the head, so we're talking now. They could be at the head, but we're also talking about a group that isn't at the head. We're also talking about a group that doesn't give orders, you understand what we're saying? No paperwork. We're talking about people that have public trust and no paperwork. What do we do about them? See, there was a group hidden in the concept of no paperwork that could have got away with something. But they that give this said, no, I don't think so. And they say, cut the head and still those with public trust will go on with a little dominion. So how do we control them? See, cut the heads doesn't work with these people. So what are we going to do with them? So they say, first you have to understand that those who should be placed in a position of public trust want the honor and prestige of that position. They don't want the position soiled by graft, abuse, and general misuse of power. They want a clean, honorable position. Thus, those who truly belong in the position of public trust will, on one side, applaud the suggestions the suggested changes, and on the other side will never enter the office until those changes take place. What did they say? They said that the people in the new system of public trust, the new policemen, the new people that have your life in their hands will love it, because there'll be no graft, there'll be no abuse, there'll be no misuse of power, because these people are being cleaned out. And so what happens? One, they are more honored by our society. They're they're going to be standing up and screaming, do it. And also they're going to take the job that they would never take before. I mean, there are people who would be really good policemen who will never touch the job because of the possibility of crookedness. Not that all policemen are crooked, but I'm just saying there are crooked police, and they're protected by their buddies, and this is going to come to an end with this public trust. Now, when you see what the public trust is, you'll understand. Next, we need to define the offenses we're talking about before we go into control. There are some offenses which will require exposure, censure, and a fine, a statement on the record, and the like. These are minor offenses, and we're not talking about them. The offenses that require banishment, a concept discussed in our chapter on laws, they say there are offenses which require banishment. Those things are so bad that immediately you're taken right out of the system, put into law, and banished, and you'll find out how horrible that is down the road when we get to laws. That is an offense so horrible that it requires the most severe of punishments. We're not talking about that kind of offense either. The kind will be handled in the court of law, and the end result of that is that there's nobody that wants to be there. So they say we're going to deal with the problems of abuse of power that are in the mid-range, a little different than what would be expected. The concept we use is this: man is not as highly developed as the do-gooders would have us believe. Thus, the punishment for abuse of power must reflect that lack of development. The need then is to make the abuse of power no longer profitable, just like they said. We would first strip the offender of all profit from his abuse. This will be accomplished by removing him or her from any position save common labor. She will never be allowed to work in a position higher than common laborer. They go on and say the pay will reflect that level of employment, obviously. Once a person's been accused of breaking the public trust and is sentenced, his first sentence is that he can never have a job higher than common labor, nor pay higher than a common labor. The person's work record, social security number, will reflect that status, and anyone who chooses to employ that person will be obligated by law to follow those guidelines. That's the first thing. Ooh, boy. These, $300,000 a year people will become common labor. Next, the offender will lose all possessions until he or she is living at the level of common labor. This loss includes all who live with him or her. There will be no payoff to another family member for his or her abuse of power. What they say? They said he's accused, he's convicted, he's a common laborer. His wife is paid by blah blah Joe Smith that bribed him in the first place, and they're doing very well. No, what they do is they take away from every family member, child, mother, niece, nephew, cousin, mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, anybody who might get paid, they watch them and check them and make sure that they have not got any of the money that this person got for the abuse of his power. Now, the wife and the children, as long as they live with this offender, their wealth and job must be removed. They can put the money or whatever they have in escrow until such time as the children or the wife or husband no longer live with the offender, and of course that can only be held in escrow if it wasn't derived from the abuse. But there people that have their own wealth and has nothing to do with what the person who was abusive did. So if they're staying with him or her, they have to put their money or their wealth or whatever they have in escrow until such time as they're no longer living with them. That could be divorce immediately, or it could be just the choice to live that life. There can be more safeguards in other areas to be covered, but you get the idea. That person who violates your trust will lose the rights and benefits given him. So also will anyone who lives with him, since he could well pass payment on to, say, his wife or the children or something, so that he ends up still living quite well, even though he's got the job of a common laborer. The question then becomes, should the family suffer for his mistake or her mistake? And the answer is yes. They also benefited. They had the prestige. They had the income. They also turned their head when he began to abuse, or at least could have known if they'd investigated. The loss of them then will cause them to be much more likely to investigate. Of course, if they turn in the abuser and leave him, he or her gets no loss unless the money gained was gained by the abuse, which is what we said. You leave the abuser and live on your own, you get whatever you had and the job you had and no loss. It's like they're willing they're willing to break up the family if the person gets caught. It's a pretty serious thing that they're laying out there for you. They go on and say the children will leave home soon enough, and the life of a laborer or child had better not be viewed as punishment. If it is, then perhaps those who have had more might give a portion back to the laborer, so that the laborer will no longer have to endure that punishment. They might consider paying the laborer more for the work they do. What a concept. The point? If you abuse our trust, you and yours will be placed in a position where they never have that power again. What of the person or persons who paid in some manner to get this person to abuse the trust? What punishment for him and her? Make it against the law and move them into the legal system. They won't like that at all. Don't allow a slap on the wrist either. This is a serious crime and must be treated that way. A person trying to bribe another person into abusing the public trust may cause damage to other people's lives or just steal outright from them. We don't allow the common man to do that. We now won't allow the wealthy to do it either. Do you hear what they said? Another area where the wealthy have a position, a good position, they take away. You bribe a public official, make them do something that they shouldn't do, and you'll go into the legal system. And it won't be a slap on the wrist that you get. It'll be considered a serious crime, and you will be treated accordingly.